Spider-Man, Spider-Man, the video game Spider-Man. Oh, I don't feel so good, Mr. Stark. Spider-Man is probably my favorite superhero of all time. The wisecracking, wall-climbing, web-slinging hero has so much charm to him. I always watched the Saturday morning cartoon and wore my Spider-Man Halloween costume as often as I could. And of course I played the video games. Jumping into this digital world and becoming Spider-Man for a few hours was so fun. Sometimes. So today we're gonna check out some Spider-Man games I played as a kid. I'm obviously not gonna be able to talk about every Spider-Man game out there, just the ones I personally have fond memories of. It's like they say, with great power comes pretty good video games. Uncle Ben was a smart man. One of the earliest Spider-Man games I can recall playing as a kid was Spider-Man Maximum Carnage on the Super Nintendo. I mean, just look at this cartridge. Look how it stands out with its bright red color scheme and this demon monster on the cover. This was the first Spider-Man game I ever played, and to be honest, it scared me. Yeah, the sprites looked all crude and spooky. The soundtrack was this weird 16-bit heavy metal. This guy in the opening at I Love You 3000. So the game starts off with a cutscene done in a comic book style with panels and speech bubbles, showing serial killer Cletus Cassidy being detained until the Carnage symbiote bonds with him, where he then breaks free and starts going on a killing spree. Yeah, 7-year-old me was definitely horrified. So the game starts off in the streets of New York. Perfect! Ideal location to start a Spider-Man game. It's an arcade-style beat-em-up, and it's loads of fun. It controls like butter. Every hit and sound effect feels satisfying. And of course, you can do Spider-Man stuff. Shoot webs, climb walls, use your webs as weapons. The game's art style is also very reminiscent of that of a comic book, with its colors and shading. But again, as a kid, I didn't know that. It just looked dark and scary. I was used to the Spider-Man cartoon. Yeah, that was all bright and colorful. It had a light-hearted tone and was super cheesy. So to go from that to, you know, Spider-Man beating up women, it was a little too much. But now that I'm older, yeah, it's a really awesome game that only kinda scares me now. A simple yet effective beat 'em up. Not much else to talk about. It definitely gets really hard though, especially when you fight the human spider.
The human spider, that's it? That's the best you got? Oh, that sucks.
Now I know about that really popular Spider-Man game on the PlayStation 1. However, I never played it. I didn't have a PS1 growing up. I was more of a Nintendo kid. So with my GameCube intact, the next Spider-Man game we're gonna talk about is Spider-Man the Movie, the game. Yeah, you know, the movie. The one with truly a masterpiece. The original Spider-Man trilogy of movies gets a lot of hate for fair reasons, but whatever, you know, I love them. So when they made games based off the movies, you know I had to get my hands on them. Heck, the main menu fills you with so much hype with its epic music. The game starts with a pretty solid cutscene recapping the first bit of the movie. Peter wants to impress Mary Jane with a new car, so he becomes a wrestler to earn some money and takes on Bonesaw! The promoter rips Peter off, the robber steals the money, he lets him go. With great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Ben doesn't feel so good, Mr. Stark. So level 1 starts with cheap sweatpants wrestler Spider-Man, and it's absolutely hilarious. The first thing you're gonna be doing is web slinging through New York, and I gotta say, even now, this feels amazing. Swinging from rooftop to rooftop overlooking the city. All you gotta do is beat up some thugs to learn the location of Uncle Ben's killer. The game is kind of interesting, because it follows the plot of the movie, but it also doesn't. It's kind of like an extended edition of the film. For example, in the movie, Spider-Man chases down Uncle Ben's killer into an abandoned warehouse and kills him. Simple as that. And spoilers, I guess. But in the game, this warehouse is huge and filled with thugs you need to beat up before finding him. Once you do, you then have a super scary and intense boss fight with him. What's with Spider-Man games having the creepiest atmosphere?
Huh, what's this door doing open?
The game is super fun, the action feels crisp and responsive, taking on hordes of enemies is really entertaining too. Do you use your combos and unique web moves to take them out, or make a swift escape to replan your strategy? This was the first game that always distracted me from the main objective, simply because I wanted to swing around and climb walls. If only there was an open world Spider-Man game. Foreshadowing. So yeah, if you love Spider-Man 1 and want to play an extended version of the movie with more Tobey Maguire,
Well, if I want to get paid this week, I'd better come up with some photos for Jonah.
this is definitely the game for you. Spider-Man 1 was a pretty big success, so naturally came Spider-Man 2, you know,
Pizza time.
the true cinematic masterpiece. But more importantly, came Spider-Man 2 the movie, the game. That realistically only had to do with 1% of the movie and was 99% new material. Is that bad? Of course not! This game is a masterpiece and was the first time that players got to genuinely feel like Spider-Man. I know, what an original thing to say, but back in 2004, how could you not be impressed with this? The best way I like to describe this game is Spider-Man meets Grand Theft Auto. You're thrown into this big and bustling open world of New York to do whatever you want. Beat up thugs, help out citizens, and of course the most important thing in Spider-Man 2, deliver pizzas. This is actually a thing. And it's amazing. There is technically a story, and it is solid enough, but just like in Grand Theft Auto, the main appeal of this game is just exploring every inch of the world and seeing what it has to offer. I'm just gonna do whatever I want. I'm Spider-Man! No one can tell me what to do! Web slinging around and having a blast when all of a sudden you see some shoplifters, or a kid who's lost his balloon, and then it's time to jump into action and save the day. And then immediately go back to swinging around because, God, this is great! Spider-Man 2 had so much going for it. Everything feels so right. The combat, the special moves, the fluidity and smoothness of Spider-Man himself, the pizza delivery theme! Now this is the true Spider-Man experience. From this point on, I've only played bits and pieces of many other Spider-Man games. Spider-Man Friend or Foe was a beat-em-up released on PS2, Wii, and Xbox 360. It was a really basic beat-em-up action-adventure game. The only thing I mainly remember was that it was multiplayer. Player 1 took control of Spider-Man, and Player 2 took control of random villains throughout the story mode, like Venom, Dr. Octopus, and the Green Goblin, just to name a few. It was simple and charming enough. If you had siblings or a friend over, it was a perfect little co-op game. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, this game was so awesome! It was essentially Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the game, 8 years before the movie came out. You take control of multiple different Spider-Mans, or Spider-Men, throughout different universes. Each one was incredibly unique and would give the player a new style of gameplay, always keeping things fresh. My personal favorite was Spider-Man Noir. The entire game would have this black and white filter, like, well, a noir film. The gameplay was also more stealth-based here. You couldn't just go around punching everything without a care in the world. Also, the voice actor for Spider-Man Noir was the same guy who voiced Spider-Man in the 90s cartoon series, my personal favorite iteration of the hero.
Say your prayers, punks. Here comes the Spider-Man.
I know, and shocker. How'd they get together? Computer dating?
Spider-Man has had a really solid run throughout the years in terms of games, but I have a very vague memory of a Spider-Man game on the PC. One that really sucked. The Amazing Spider-Man and Captain America in Doctor Doom's Revenge. So what we have here is a game on the PC. I can't seem to remember it all too well though. Let's play a level and see if it refreshes my memory. Oh, that's right, it's all coming back to me now. This game sucks! I'm fighting a stupid Rock'em Sock'em robot. Could you imagine if this is what the Avengers movies were? The combat is so stiff and awkward. I can never tell if I'm hitting my opponent. And since this game is 100% combat, it leads to some terrible times. At least I get to play as Spider-Man now. Look at this. Is this what you consider fun? This game came out in 1989, and may I remind you, Super Mario Bros. 1 came out 2 years before this. Oh, you know, famous Spider-Man villain, Machete. And finally, I've reached the final boss of this game. Is it Thanos? No, of course not, it's Gorilla. I lost. I wish this game stayed forgotten. And those were just a few Spider-Man games I've played throughout my life. I'm currently playing through Spider-Man on PS4, and all I can say is, wow, it's the perfect Spider-Man experience, and we've definitely come a long way from, well, you know. Let me know your favorite Spider-Man game down below. Thanks again, and remember, with great power comes great pizza delivery music.